All right, good. So
Let's go.
take a, yeah, good. All right, so hello, Emma.
Hi, Carl. Lovely to
Hi.
be here. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
yeah, no, thanks for joining us. Nice to meet you. Before we get started, I do just want to say to anybody who's watching, just a quick reminder that this will be available as a podcast as well later, and the previous episodes are also available as a podcast. So the link to that will be in the bottom underneath the video. And if you're watching and you enjoy it, please like and subscribe and leave comments and reviews, and that just helps more people see the video. So we're with Emma today. Emma, if you could introduce yourself quickly, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emma Cann. I used to be a teacher, and I left teaching a year or so ago. Been on a journey since, and I've now come back to education, and I work with teachers to help them manage the challenges of teaching, really, and basically to be able to do the job that they love to do, but not burn out in the process.
Okay.
Which I'm sure we'll talk about today, kind of how I've got to that point. But yeah, so I use my coaching and my teaching experience to help teachers just be able to have the impact they want to have, but actually enjoy the job they're doing at the same time. I shouldn't really need to be here, but unfortunately I do.
Right.
And teachers do need me, but I'm loving what I do at the moment, which is great.
Good. So you'll be the first person I think that we've had so far who's not teaching, or well, maybe you're moving back into it now. But
Yeah.
this is going to be a little bit different, perhaps from some of the other conversations we've had. But I think that it will be something that resonates with, perhaps sadly, most of the people
Mm,
watching.
yeah.
And it's something that I think is not. I mean, you'll know more than me perhaps about this, but it's something that I think is not very often talked about, the problems of burnout and also just the challenges that face teachers, because my experience and my observation has been that as a teacher, you're supposed to feel grateful and humbled by the gift that you've been given for doing the great things that
Mm,
education brings. And if
yeah.
you have anything like a bad word to say about that, then it seems to get jumped on pretty quickly, which I imagine is something you'll recognize, and it's probably central to your experience, Emma.
Yeah, I think there is something in that. I think the danger with that is, like, because everyone goes into teaching for the right reasons. Like, people go
Mm,
into teaching because they want to have a difference and make an
right.
impact, don't they? So then to feel like you need to say something to look after yourself,
Mm,
sometimes I think the danger is it feels selfish to say,
right.
actually, you know I need to look after myself, because
Yeah.
we've sort of been told explicitly or implicitly that actually, we're here for the children, so we have
Yeah.
to do everything for the children, and
Yeah.
that's like our primary focus. So
Yeah.
anything else sort of feels not as important as that. But
Right.
actually, I think what I realized myself, and also like teachers I work with now have started saying things to me. Like, someone said to me the other day, they said, I've always thought I had to do the best for the children. And she said, and I always put that first. And now what I'm realizing is that I have to do some of this other stuff. Like, I have to think about how I manage things and how I
Yeah.
work with my team, and how I,
Right.
how I kind of look after myself. Because if I don't do that, I'm not doing the best job for the children. So
Mm,
actually, it's not sort of secondary to it. And I think maybe for a while, maybe some people still do, but they feel like it's sort of secondary to children is
sure.
their well-being. Because if you put
Yeah.
yourself you're selfish, you're not looking after the children. And I
Right.
think that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? And also, the
Yeah.
thing
I
that you
think.
say, people think teachers are there to do good, so therefore,
Yeah.
to talk about anything other than doing good, you feel
Yeah.
like you're not doing your job properly.
Yeah, and I think people kind of it shines a spotlight perhaps on something that people are, I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word, but maybe it makes people question. Maybe it makes it seem somewhat ingenuous or something. Well, I've decided to dedicate myself to doing this good thing, and that makes me a good person, and that people admire me for that. And then when I start not even complaining, but saying anything, anything that kind of doesn't follow that direct line of, oh, I'm so grateful to be doing something so good, and this, and then as soon as you say anything other than that, I think it shines a different light on something. And I don't know if people are just incapable of holding two positions at the same time and realizing, no, I'm still
Mm,
grateful for the opportunity, but there's also this other side of it. There's also this other
yeah.
part of it.
And I've seen, I don't know if you've ever seen this, like I've seen it as like I don't know where it came from, a quote, and you sometimes see it like illustrated and put up on Instagram or whatever, and it says, a teacher is like a candle, it consumes its way, it consumes itself to light the way for others, which
Okay.
is just like, in my eyes, that's just completely problematic, because what
Yeah.
you're saying is teachers need to burn out
Yeah.
completely to do good, and if they're not burning out, what are you doing? You're not working
Yeah.
hard enough,
That's it.
and
I
you're not
found
helping.
I found that the meme complex around teaching is a lot of that. A lot of things that paint the picture of teaching as a sacrifice, but like a worthwhile sacrifice, like a martyrdom, that you know, teachers
Yeah,
signed up for this. This is what it is to be a
yeah,
teacher, and then celebrating that in a way that I think is supposed to look like celebration, like appreciation, but it does then mean that you're kind of boxed into that. If you try not to be that, if you contemplate on how I could be a good teacher without making such a drastic sacrifice,
yeah.
then you're kind of breaking from the pack, and you're not quite the martyr that everybody wants you to be. And they've just celebrated it for you. They've given you appreciation for it. It feels very analogous, especially at the moment, without going too far down the obvious line,
Yeah.
the nursing profession and the healthcare profession at the moment. I think we're seeing a lot of the same things. People are, you know, celebrating the great work that healthcare professionals are doing, and the sacrifices they're making. But then also, kind of implicit in that celebration is, well, they're expected to make that sacrifice. That's part of the job. And if you don't make that sacrifice, then you're not performing to the fullest extent of what the job expects of you. Do you feel there's a
And I think,
connection there?
yeah, and I think even for teachers to kind of say like this is just a job, sometimes like
Right.
just that word, you know, that sentence, like this is my job, sometimes that creates a bit of, I don't know, like it goes against that sort of story, that like that conversation you just said, that which is
Yeah.
that, you know, you should be grateful for doing this and that you are giving your life to do this. And if you go, actually
Yeah.
it's my job, so I want to
Yeah.
go home at 5 o'clock
Yeah.
and I want to, you know, spend my weekend doing something other than working, and I'd actually like to spend some time with my family and go out and do something else. Actually, I think whether or not it is seen badly by other people, or whether it's like the thing that teachers put on themselves,
Mm.
because I think for a long time, like I loved teaching. Like I genuinely thought and still think it can be the best job in the world, you know, which is
Right.
why I think I've come back to it to help
Right.
other teachers, because I couldn't leave it completely. I sort of thought that I wanted to, but actually I didn't, because I love it too much.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I think I thought for a long time this is just kind of what I've signed up for.
Right.
You know, if I have to work every weekend
Right.
because this is what teachers do. And it
Yeah.
was what all the other teachers around me were doing.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
my other teacher friends, you know, if I
Yeah.
went home at 5 o'clock and the building was locked at 6 o'clock and I went home at 5, someone would say to me, someone would call me a part-timer as I was walking down the
Yeah.
corridor.
You're
Whether
the
they were like
one. Yeah.
joking or not, they're like, oh
Right.
great, you're leaving early today. And you
Yeah.
think, hold on, like I've been here
Yeah.
since 7 o'clock this
Yeah.
morning or whatever
But you're
time, you
the
know.
one who's not working quite as hard as everybody else.
Exactly. You know,
Yeah.
if you're in the
Yeah.
staff room having a cup of tea,
Yeah.
you know that someone is thinking, or you think that someone's thinking, maybe they're not, you know, but you think that someone's thinking, how have you got time to have a cup of tea? I'm rushed off
Right.
my feet. What are you
Right.
doing?
Right.
So then
Right.
you think, and then it can maybe become a bit competitive. And I
Yeah. Of
don't
course.
know
Yeah.
if it's sort of, people realize they're doing it explicitly, but there's a sort of like, is that martyr, like that
Yeah.
martyr?
Well, I think there's two parts of it, because I think this gets talked about a little bit outside of the teaching profession anyway. The kind of the drive to work a little bit longer, get in a little bit earlier, to be seen to be the one who's the hardworking, the industrious one. I think that that's something that people, I think, are beginning to kind of recognize as perhaps not the healthiest of drives in across all industries.
Yeah,
But there's something about teaching that adds that element of of sacrifice for the good that
Well, because it's for the
adds.
children, isn't it?
Right,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's very hard, and this was my problem. It was very hard for me to see it. Like, now I've stepped away from it, I can kind of see
Right.
where I went wrong, which is how I can help other people. But I feel like I couldn't think as objectively as I needed to, because it always comes down to, but that's for the children. So it's hard to go, well, I won't do that. And when I spoke to non-teaching friends and told them I was feeling stressed or had stuff to do, they just said, well, just don't do it. I said, well, you can't not do it. They said, well, don't do it. Like, it's 6 o'clock, come home.
Yeah.
Like, let's go out, let's do something, go to work tomorrow and deal with it tomorrow. But that doesn't work like that, because if I haven't planned and resourced and done everything by the time I leave, when I get in tomorrow, like, not only am I going to be stressed because I haven't done it, like, I would then feel that child, even if it's like making resources for one child that is going to need something different, like it's very hard to go, well, I helped 29 children today, but one didn't quite get it, because obviously I think what most teachers do is they focus on that one.
Right.
And that's what I was doing. And I think I was trying to live up to like unrealistic standards, because it comes down to the children. So what I was thinking was, even when I would teach a lesson for 30 children, and generally that's gone well, but I would always focus on the one child that I hadn't quite done enough for. I thought, like, if only I'd done something slightly different for them, like they would have accessed that learning better, or if only I'd been able to support them emotionally, like they would have engaged with that better, or whatever. And actually, I've just helped 29 children like improve their learning and get somewhere, but instead my brain would always take me to, but you could have done more. And I think it's a good thing that teachers have that to some extent, because
and I think there's two things
striving to do more.
Right. And there's two things I think that draw on that. One is that, as most teachers get into the profession for something along those lines, right? Because they're driven to educate, to help. Something about that is what's appealing to the teaching profession. But then it's also, you mentioned some of the memes and things that you mentioned before. This is another thing that I think gets kind of embedded into a lot of the sort of the meme culture and the celebration of teachers is, how the teacher does every little thing to help every little student. And it's great to get appreciation for doing that. But then again, it just kind of sets up, this is what teaching is, and anything less than this is not good teaching. And so as a teacher, then you feel like you're falling short of the mark unless you've done absolutely everything to be completely perfect. Otherwise, you are not what a teacher's supposed to be.
Yeah. And on that line, like the sort of Pinterest classrooms.
Right, exactly, right,
and I just think like that in itself isn't a problem. Like, if you want to do that as a teacher, you have the time and inclination and the creativity to do that, like that is incredible. Like if your children can come into your classroom and have this amazing sort of immersive experience, but to them have teachers feeling bad because they can't do that, or kind of maybe worse, like focusing on that above the stuff that's really going to have the impact.
That side is, I don't know if it's worse, because one, the problem of inferiority kind of leads to the bigger topic we're going to obviously be moving towards, about the burnout thing. So that, I don't know that anything else is worse than that per se, but from the the educational perspective, so many of the things that become trending videos on Twitter and things like that, greetings at the doors and high fives and all of these things, again, great, but they're not the most valuable things that a teacher can do, and they certainly don't detract from the learning unless you decide to spend more of your time on that than on other more important things. I think some teachers do kind of get kind of pulled into that because it's the trend and it's everybody's talking about it, and there's so many likes and retweets and whatever else, and you think, oh well, I should be doing more of that.
Yeah, it probably goes into, like you say, then feeling like, well, I should be doing that, which then might take you away from the stuff that's having the impact. Exactly, it all leads into what I'm saying about, what we're saying about burnout, because if you're then trying to if you're always comparing yourself to others and you're trying to keep up with whoever, you're always comparing yourself. Like that's in teaching, that's in life. Like I'm learning that now, being out of teaching and having my own business. Like there's always someone that's doing better, that's doing something different, that I think, oh, maybe I should do that, or maybe I should do it this way.
It's tough.
I've realized that actually a lot of this stuff is in my own head. And so I think if I'd sort of had some of that knowledge when I was teaching, I could probably see that I was comparing myself, or that I was trying to keep up with these unrealistic expectations, or whatever it was. And I think that, all the stuff that's shared online that we're talking about on its own isn't a bad thing. It's just if it's used to make people feel inferior, which
of
then
course.
leads to this kind of like
I wonder as well,
going with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I wonder, I mean, I think we're probably around about a similar kind of age. We've probably been in this for a similar kind of time period, which means neither of us can really answer this question, I think. But I wonder how much this has changed with the advent of social media, and the fact that everything is now online and there's videos, and you've mentioned Pinterest. Well, 20 years ago there wouldn't have been Pinterest, so if you were comparing yourself to other teachers, it was only the teachers in your school, the teachers in your staff room, which is maybe 20 teachers. But now you're compared with every teacher in the world almost, because of Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, and it just means that, or that scope for self-comparison has become so much broader, presumably.
I've never thought about that, and I think with everything with the internet, there's a good and a bad, isn't there? So to flip that now, I know, because I always thought this when I was teaching, like I would go, right, I need to teach such and such, like I'll go online, I'll find some resources, like I'll see what other people are doing, I'll get some ideas. And I did think, like, what did people do before the internet? Like, they had to come up with this stuff on their own, or they would have to like write everything by hand, and you think, what the heck did they do? Like, how did they cope? So there is that, because
but
it's
I wonder
such
as well. Again, I mean,
but then there's overload as well, because sometimes I would download like 15 alternative resources before I even started planning the lesson, and if I just got on and done it, I probably would have made something just as good as all the things I found.
I think that this pendulum could kind of swing forever, because as obviously the inspiration is great. You ask, where would you get that inspiration from before, without the internet? But you probably just wouldn't. You'd just plan your lesson, and you'd use the materials you had to hand, and you'd teach. And sure, maybe there's more materials available now, which means perhaps quality has improved. Almost certainly the quality has improved, but it doesn't necessarily mean that lessons were terrible before. And perhaps you'd be able to teach a perfectly good lesson without the mountain of inspiration that you see online. So it's just a pendulum that could swing forever. You're going to always be bouncing between the good and the bad there. There's a counter argument, I think, to everything.
But it's really interesting, because I hadn't really thought about that. I think because it's just, like you say, it's just what we're used to. It's just the way that we teach and the way that we can do I mean, like, even having this conversation now, like we could be sat here looking at each other in like different continents, and you can do that. Like the thought of that, like 20 years ago just wouldn't have been a thing. So so there's all these great things that you can share ideas with people in different places in the world and all that. But then I think with anything, I think it's just sometimes if there's choice is good, and I really like advocate for choice teachers, because when I was sort of at bad times in teaching, like I think I felt like I didn't have a choice. I felt like I needed to, this, like I said before, like this is kind of what I signed up for. Like I have to work every weekend, I have to do it like this, like I can only ever be a teacher, I can't do anything else, like I don't have a choice. So I do think choice is important, but I think again there's a like probably that pendulum, because if you have too much choice, it's sort of just paralyzing, isn't it? You go, oh my god, like what am I going to choose? Like there's too much there. So like you say, it's just probably everything is a balance. Which again is the balance between what I'm sort of working with teachers on, like the balance of looking after yourself, but not to the detriment of your students, but not looking after your students to the detriment of you. Like you have to get that balance right.
That's right. It came up earlier as well, that idea of remembering not to neglect yourself, or to put your kind of your self-care or your self-consideration second. I think I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be a better teacher if you're healthier and if you're not exhausted. And another analogy that sort of comes to mind, this might be over egging the pudding a little bit, but the idea of, if you're on an airplane and there's an emergency, you're supposed to put
Yeah.
your mask on before
Yeah.
before the dependents. And I think there's an element of that
Yeah.
where, if you are not looking after yourself, and if you are not keeping healthy and keeping on top of your own, whether it's mental health or just physical health through exhaustion and whatever else, I mean, famously, teachers they have terrible diets because they don't have time to kind of sit and
But
cook
also,
and eat a
like,
proper meal.
remember this is kind of what really I think was like a sort of turning point for me, was when I sort of had this realization that I don't want to be modeling for my pupils, like my class, my children, my
Right.
pupils, whatever you want to call them. Like, I'm here, like, I'm meant to be their role model. So
Yeah,
if
you're
I'm
pulling your
not
hair out. Yeah,
wanting to be here, if I
yeah,
look
absolutely.
stressed and overrun, and also if I'm sort of advocate, when I was thinking about should I leave teaching, I got back to this point of like, well, I don't have a choice, like this is all I can do. I sort of had labeled myself as a teacher, like this is me forever now. And then I sort of had this moment of, hold on, like, I don't want any of my pupils to feel at any point in their life like they don't have a choice
In,
to do something else. Like, if they ever said to me, like, Miss, I don't think I can do that, like, what would I say to them? So I kind of had to use what I would say to my pupils to say to me, to go, actually, like, you feel stuck, but do you want to be the person that feels stuck? And I'm sure you've met people like this as well. Like, I've definitely met teachers that moan about their job every day in the staff room. And I thought, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't want to be here in 30 years still moaning about it. Like, I've got to be, for myself, for my own well-being, my own mental health, like, but also for all these children that I teach, I have to leave them, even though that's a hard thing to do. Like, I have to make this decision to leave, because actually if I stay, I'm teaching them something worse than if I go.
Right. But even leaving, I mean,
it sounds strong,
no,
it's I'm over egging it, but like, you really want those pupils to feel like they can do anything. Like, that's why we go into teaching, isn't it? So like, teach children, exactly, like, anything's possible. What you put your mind to, you can do. So if I go, anything's possible for you, but for me, I can't do that. Like, what am I teaching?
I've had to sacrifice myself to make everything possible for you.
But
I mean, there's also even leaving.
Them to sacrifice themselves, and that's not what I want to do.
Even leaving, you talk about leaving, and we'll I think come back to what that was like for you and what you left to do. We'll perhaps talk about. But even leaving, I think you talk about that teachers, maybe kind of felt trapped in the profession for 10, 20, 30 years. They're still teaching and complaining about it every day. Even leaving comes under the same kind of scrutiny that everything else does. Somebody who leaves the teaching profession is, they've abandoned the children, and there's so much talk about teachers leaving, and how many, in a way that we don't examine the numbers of how many people leave any other profession. How many people have left secondhand car sales? Nobody knows, nobody cares. But when we hear about numbers of people leaving teaching professions, it's a terrible figure. And each of those teachers is somehow guilty for kind of abandoning. And so even just the idea to leave comes under the same pressures as everything else, I think.
Well, I don't think teachers should feel guilty for that.
No, of course not.
But I think that I think what that's really highlighting is that the profession is not sustainable if it continues with this like unmanageable workload and unmanageable expectations. Like, that is not sustainable.
And something, in fact, I mean, so you mentioned for the kids a few times. That kind of phrase has come up quite a lot already. And I should point out actually that I don't teach kids, and I did for a short while, but just as a part of when I was teaching in a particular institution. So I've never spent masses of time teaching kids. I taught in a school for a while, but it was kind of it was a short-term arrangement. I spent most of my time teaching adults, and so I've avoided some of that, just because a lot of the emotional side of that.
Do you still have that pressure but you're here for your students regardless of their age? Or do you think that pressure is more because it's children?
Yeah, so that's what I think. I think the emotional tie to all of that is more when you're teaching children. But the irony, I think it kind of it's highlighted for me a particular irony that when you talk about the sacrifice and the idea that, well, as a teacher, I've got to sacrifice all of my time. I've got to spend my evenings and my weekends because it's for the kids. But the reality is actually where the burnout comes from, I think, my experience, my observation of this has been, that it's all the stuff that's peripheral to what you do for the
Well,
kids. It's the paperwork,
yeah,
it's the
no,
admin.
I
That's what you
completely agree
spend
with
your
you.
time on. So you're burning out, not for the kids, but for administration.
Yeah, do you know what, that is really true. I think that the problem is, like, with this sort of, well, you know, I always think of, I can't remember the name of the character, but you know, in The Simpsons there's a character that always goes like, think of the children, won't someone
Yeah,
think
okay.
of the children? Like, I always have her in my head. But anyway, I digress. But with that, it does mean that there is this pressure of like, I need to do more because I
Yeah.
need to always have all these things. But actually, you're right. A lot of it comes down to like, why was I doing some of this stuff? I was doing it because I felt like I had to. And different schools are different, and
Of
different sort of
course.
settings will be different. You know, and some schools have got this kind of like sorted, really. You know, they're quite good, and I think that's the schools that have realized that well-being for teachers is not, as I said to someone else something the other day, like they'd spoken to schools and said, oh, we've got this well-being policy, and so what we're doing is we're getting like free tea and coffee in the staff room, and we're getting chocolate biscuits on a Friday.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that isn't great, but like that isn't well-being. Like,
The teachers
well-being
need some coffee if they're going to be working until 9, 10 o'clock at night. They
well,
must have
exactly,
coffee, right?
like that's great, and I'm not saying don't do that, because like, you know, like, if I don't have my cup of tea, like that is,
Yeah.
I'm going to find that harder, like, and who's going to say no to a chocolate biscuit?
Right.
But I think that on its own, if you're then still expected to write a, you know, page lesson plan for, you know, if you're spending an hour planning a lesson that's going to be done in less than an hour, like,
Right.
like you've got two timetables. You've got like
Yeah.
a full teaching timetable and a full planning timetable
That's
before
it.
you even
Exactly
mark
right.
all
Yeah.
of it.
Right.
And if you're still expecting every teacher to mark, you know, so I taught in primary schools, so you would teach at least, you know, an English lesson, a maths lesson every day, and probably like 2 other main subjects in the afternoon, plus maybe like spelling or some other kind of maths or grammar or something. So, you know, at the end of the day, you've got at least 30 English books, 30 maths books, 30 geography books, 30 something else books. You might have 120 books to mark at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So then if they sort of say for well-being, or everyone has to go to the staff room because we're having biscuits, I think, great, but I've still got 120 books to mark, so now you're making me do that later.
Yeah, I mean, that was the
So
hardest part for me when I was teaching in schools and when I was teaching in that kind of more staff room environment. Because I don't so much now. The hardest part for me was that kind of having to be in a particular place at a particular time, to be where all the other teachers are. I have to be in the staff room if there's a gathering. I used to dislike, even again, this is partly to do with me, it's just the fact that I'm not particularly social, but also just I think it's part of the model, and I think it's relatively universal, that you're supposed to really kind of hold up the idea of the team aspect and the family aspect. These are metaphors that often get used, and so it's things like it would be somebody's birthday, and so there would be cake, and so then if you weren't there when the cake was being cut or whatever, you're kind of letting the side down, and that's got nothing to do with the kids, that's got nothing to do with the teaching. It's all part
no.
of just kind of, and yet
But
at the same
you know,
time,
you would have been there had you not had so much else to do.
well,
So it's not like you're not
perhaps.
going, I don't care about this.
Yeah.
And I completely understand why someone would sort of feel like, we want to create a team, and the way we're going to create a team, bring in and everyone's going to eat together, whatever it is.
Right.
But unless you change the other stuff, you can't just add that on, and that's what you're saying.
And the irony for me has been as well, and again, this sometimes I don't know what's just my narrow experience and what's universal. This seems to be a relatively common thing. Is, you know, there's all that emphasis on the team, the family, through gatherings and cake and tea and biscuits. But actually, teachers tend to be, although you're in a room of 20, 30 other teachers, it's quite an isolating job when you're planning your lessons and you're marking and you're doing it by yourself. You're not really a part of a team. And one of the things that when I work with schools and when I work with faculties, one of the things that I try to do is to bring more collaboration in amongst teachers. Not more tea and biscuits and sharing a cake, but more actually working together, collaborating on the academic goals, you know.
And so I can reflect on my experience and see when I had real collaboration, that was like the best part of my teaching.
Right.
Like I was better, like I had more ideas, like I felt supported. I worked with one person in particular that we formed such a strong team that, you know, always knew that he had my back and I had his back. So you
Hmm.
just trust everything. If I said I was going to do something, he'd know I was going to do it. And if he
Right.
said he was going to do it, so it didn't matter if he said he was going to, you know, bring me some resources and I was teaching the lesson at 1 o'clock. If they weren't
You
there
knew
at
they'd be
1:45,
there.
I knew he'd still come in and he'd bring it. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine, because he said
Right.
he was going to do it. And we kind of had each other's back. So if I knew he had something on at the weekend, I'd say, well, I'll take that. Like, I'll do that for
Hmm.
you, and you do this for me. And it always worked. And we really did plan together and do everything together. But I do agree with you with the sort of isolation, because I remember when I left, and someone said to me, I think it might have been my dad, I don't know. Someone said to me, oh, you know, you're so used to being in such a social job and being around people. And I said, the thing is, I don't know if that's actually true,
Yeah.
because especially sort of at my worst, you know, when I was so busy
Right.
and stressed and not eating lunch and not going to the staff room because who's got time to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
um Actually, I said I could go days without really
Yeah.
actually speaking to another adult.
Right.
Like, I'm
Right.
always around children,
Of course. Yeah.
and I'm always like teaching, and I'm saying children, you know, in your case it might be around students, but you're having a different, even though they're adults, you're having an
It's a
adult
different
conversation.
kind of conversation. I mean, and I also, yeah, like just working at the college level, at the university level. I mean, I'm not exactly old, but there really is a big gap between kind of college age students who are still young adults, but they're kind of, you know, just crossing over into adulthood, but they've just left school, you know, so you
Yeah.
can look at their age and we can talk about what, you know, what age adulthood is and things like that. They've just left school. And here in Indonesia, in fact, where I work and teach, there's a very little difference between the high school classroom, secondary school classroom, and the university classroom, which I think, you know, the Western model, perhaps not necessarily every institution, but the Western model, there's a bit of a kind of a gap between, well, this is school, it functions this way, and students are expected to behave and learn this way, and then this is university, and we're expected to kind of grow up and behave a little bit differently. It might not always actually work out that way, but there is a kind of the
Yeah.
model is there, the paradigm is there. Where here, it really does feel often like an extension
And
of
also, it's like
school.
a status thing, you know, not in a,
Exactly, it is. Yeah.
I don't necessarily like the word status, but it is like, you are the teacher. So regardless of how old you are, like,
Yeah.
you're going
Yeah.
to have a different kind of conversation because
Yeah.
it's teacher
Yeah.
student.
Yeah. It's certainly not a social
You teach
environment. I wouldn't
someone
want it
older
to be.
than you,
Right.
but you're
I mean,
still
I
a
think
student.
one of the things that I think can be a problem is when a teacher treats the classroom like it's a social engagement. You know, you kind of getting too friendly with the students and treating it like it's hanging out is a problem, because
Yeah.
you're not, you
Yeah.
know, you're not focused on the right goal. So it's not a
Yeah.
social environment. You're spending a
No.
lot of time around people. You're always engaged with people, you're always
Yes.
talking and communicating, conversing, but it's
Yeah.
not a social thing. It's not
No.
which is actually why it suits me, you know. Again, like I mentioned before, I'm not a particularly social person, and people often kind of wonder, well, how can you do what you do? And it's because I'm not socializing. Right? Teaching,
No.
training, the work that I do
Yeah.
is not socializing, and the
That's,
social side of it, when I have to hang around with teachers, is sometimes my least favorite part.
yeah, and that's where you're right. It can be isolating, because I
Yeah.
sort of reflected on it and I thought, yeah, like, people from the outside, and I think this is particularly with teaching, because everyone's been to school,
Yes.
everyone assumes they know what teaching is.
Right.
So this is what we went back right at the beginning when we were talking about the expectations people have, and the way it's sort of portrayed online and in the media and everything.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has an opinion on
Yeah.
teaching because they
Yeah.
went to school,
Yeah.
therefore they're an expert in
Yeah.
teaching, you know.
That's it. Yeah.
So people don't have that. If someone says to me, you know, I'm a whatever, like a graphic designer, I think, I don't know
Nothing to
anything
say
about
about
that.
it. Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
does that mean? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
When someone says when they're a teacher, people assume they know. So it's interesting that people think that teaching is very like, I'm around people all the time, and actually I am when I'm collaborating, and I think that's good. You have to be very good
Yeah.
at
When
communicating.
that's present. Yeah.
But you're right, there is a sort of, it's not quite maybe as social as people think, or maybe you're
Yeah.
not around people as much as, you know, people
I mean, it's
outside
just
think
very
you do.
different.
It can be quite lonely.
I've worked in an office environment, and again, because I don't tend to engage in the social sides of things as much, you know, it's different for me than from somebody else. But even for me, you know, I've worked in an office environment. When you're in an office of, you know, 20 or 30 other office staff, and there's a lot of chat, and there's a lot of, it is quite a social environment. Everybody's got their work to do, and they're doing their work, they're typing away or whatever, but there's a lot of chat, there's a lot of kind of, so, you know, there's jokes being told, and there's gossip, and it's just a kind of, in that way, it's a social environment. That's not, of course, what being in a classroom is like. You've got 30, the same number of people, there are 30 students in the classroom, but it's not at all the same. And there's more speaking, you know. In the office environment, you speak less because you've got work to do, so but you might kind of chip in, make a comment, pass your opinion on what somebody else just said. So throughout the day, the number of words you speak is going to be a lot less, but it's much more social. Whereas in a classroom, I'm speaking all day, you know, I'm interacting with students all day, but none of it is social.
And even when you're interacting with other teachers, like what I found was, when you're particularly busy, you realize, when you reflect on it, like, all I said to someone else was like, you spoke to them when you were queuing for the photocopier, and you talked about what else was happening later this day, and I need to tell this and this.
That's it. You've got a list of things you need to pass on.
And so actually you don't get any time for just, hi, how are you? Like, you know, you walk in the building and someone goes, morning, can I ask you about this? And you go, oh, right,
yes,
great,
exactly
like,
right.
on.
Exactly right.
So as soon as you walk in the building, like, you're on, you know, you've got to be ready to respond, and that in itself is exhausting.
Yeah, I think even beyond that, because there is such little kind of outlet, a lot of teachers, you know, again, as I've observed, when you do get that chance to be in the staff room with the other teachers, you know, it's the 5 minutes that you spend with other adults that you can relate to because they're teachers as well. That 5 minutes is spent releasing the pressure and the frustration of the crappy day that you might have had. And so it's 5 minutes complaining, moaning about your least favorite students, or about how the copy is broken, or about how, you know, the computer crashed halfway through the lesson, just moaning about the worst parts of your day. And that seems to be the bulk of interaction between teachers, either passing on information, asking for a favor, or complaining about how much how bad a day you've had. And so it's not
and I think that's the thing, if you don't get enough time, because I've definitely had, you know, the flip side of that is that you can really share those really funny, light, happy, like, this lesson was brilliant moments. But like I said before, teachers quite often focus on what went wrong. So they're probably more likely to walk into the staff room and say, oh my God, this lesson was a nightmare, rather than, I just taught an amazing lesson. And
I don't know about you. That's what I was going to say. I was going to say exactly the same. Sometimes it feels braggy. So then, even, you know, if you do have something to say along those lines, it can feel like you're bragging, especially if, you know, the other teachers have had a bad day. Or it's really tough when, again, you know, I work in teacher development. So I work now I spend most of my time with other teachers, working on their development training and things like that, or with schools working on their faculty. So I'm in a development role now, and that's fine. When I was working in the university, it was particularly challenging because, you know, a lot of the teachers, or lecturers as they tend to get termed there, were not the best educators, often because they were something else by background. You know, they were they're researchers, or they're specialists in their area, and the teaching side is just something that they do as a part of a broader, so they're not particularly competent educators all the time, perhaps. And so then it can kind of feel like you're kind of ramming it down their throat to talk about how great your lesson was because you did this thing and that thing, and they sort of, either they're not connecting with it, or they feel like you're kind of trying to send a message or something, or it just feels like it's bragging. And so you do tend to spend more time connecting on the shared challenges, and perhaps.
Because we were saying before, weren't we, you know, like, there's sort of this like competitiveness, you know, whether teachers sort of realize it or do it sort of overtly or not, but it's not about necessarily competitive in that sense. It's not competing about how good your lessons are. It's more about like how exhausted you are, or how
that's right.
And actually that isn't the focus. Like, if maybe we were more focused on, this went really well and I really want to share this, and I want to talk about this, rather than, oh my God, I'm working so hard and I did this and I took all these books home and I marked this, you know. If the focus is just shifted ever so slightly to focusing on those positives, then you'd get all that collaborate. But you also need a culture of trust to do that, because, like, say, if you walk into the classroom and you say it without that culture, you're seen as bragging. But if you've built a culture where you can trust each other and share, like, that's different.
Right. And again, because it's competitive, we talked, we talked already about how the competitive nature means that if you're not pulling your weight, if you're not meeting the standards of everybody else, if you're falling behind in one way or another, then you're kind of losing the competition, and there's a judgment attached to that. You're not working as hard as everybody else. You're not doing your bit. The other end of it, you have to find a spot in the middle, because the other end of it is, if you're working harder than everybody else, then you're trying too hard. It's kind of the same
Mhm.
mentality for students in the classroom of the goody two shoes, teacher's pet, teacher's favorite, apple for the teacher. Teachers get that same judgment. If you're the one who's shining the most, having the best lessons, putting that effort into, if you're the favorite teacher, if the students love you more than the other teachers, chances are the other teachers don't like you that much, because they feel that everybody kind of puts themselves into some kind of a hierarchy, often
Mhm.
doing it themselves. They're not being put there, they're putting themselves there, thinking, well, I'm not working that hard, and the judgment tends to then go outwards and say they're working too hard, they're doing too much, they're trying too hard, they're trying
Yeah,
to prove something.
I think a lot of it though, like you sort of like touched on there, like a lot of it is in people's heads.
Definitely.
Like, there is like, I'm not, thinking, because I'm just thinking back to, like, I'm sure I must have thought before, like, oh, I'm not working hard enough. If you almost feel guilty for getting your work done well, like doing it
Yeah,
productively. Like, so if you
yeah,
manage your
because it means
time
you had time
well,
to do it, right? Yeah, exactly.
and you
Yeah,
think, well, actually, I think I'm done. Like, I actually
yeah,
think I can leave now.
yeah,
And actually, I don't
yeah,
think I've got loads to take home with me today. Like,
yeah,
I think I've done it.
yeah.
I always used to think, well, what have I missed? Like,
Well,
that
I
can't
must
be
admit,
right. There must be something else I should be doing, because I
exactly
can't
right.
possibly be finished and
I
not
mean,
have all.
I one of the things that I've worked on, one of the shifts that I made in my own teaching, and something that I work with schools on as well, is to reduce things like, I find I do less marking than a lot of other teachers, because of the nature of how I run my assessments and how I set my tasks. So I don't tend to do lots of standardized, formalized tests that need to be marked. I tend to do more practical assessments that get assessed in the classroom. We'll do something collaborative in the classroom. I assess it on the spot whilst it's happening, and then afterwards I'll spend my time writing feedback, and preferably I'll meet with the students and give verbal feedback.
Yeah,
So I spend a lot less time marking papers than a lot of other teachers do. I don't give out anything that I consider to be kind of needless homework. If it's just busy work, then I won't
yeah,
do it. So I've got less homework to mark than a lot of other teachers do. So I do have less work to do than some of my colleagues, but it's because I focus on what's valuable, or I organize it in such a way that it's
yeah.
it's self-contained and self-sufficient. And then you find, well, yeah, I am spending less time on this than other
Yeah.
teachers are.
But this is kind of what I was saying before, like what is good for the students and what is good practice doesn't have to be different to what is good for the teacher and what's
Exactly
going to
right.
help their
Exactly
well-being.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
it might actually be the same thing. So if you can, what I do now with teachers is really help them with what their challenges are. So they can come to a session, so we have like one-to-one sessions, and they can come and say, I'm worried about whatever, like, I've got this, I'm trying to get my team on board to do something, or I've got this, I'm really worried about, I don't feel confident with doing this, I run this meeting, or I've got to, I'm feeling a bit stressed and overwhelmed and I can't prioritize what I've got to do, whatever it is, and we kind of work out what they could do. And they always go away with a plan that they have created that works for them, where they are now, as a result, going to do their job better. Like, they're going to take control and get their work done in whatever way that
Right.
is. Like, feel more confident doing their work, feel calmer doing it, feel less overwhelmed, feel in control, basically. But as a result, they're then going to feel better about themselves,
Right.
because they feel happier, because suddenly they're in control. Like, so if you're in control, you're going to teach better, but you're also going to feel better, aren't you? Like,
Yeah. Of
if
course.
you
Yeah.
feel calmer, you're going to teach better. And what I was saying before about being a role model to your students, like, if you're tearing your hair out, that isn't what you want to show them. You don't want to
No.
show, like, to do a good job you have to burn yourself
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Like, what we
Yeah.
want to be showing them is, like, you can do a job that you love. Like, when you leave school, or when you teach older, like, adults, but when you are in the world of work, you do not have to sort of sign up
Right.
for this
Right.
like story that you have to do a job that makes you miserable,
Right.
and like
Right.
we don't
I
want to
mean,
be teachers for that.
another thing there that comes to mind as well. I mean, if you're spending all of that time, uh, evenings and weekends on whether it's marking, planning, whatever it is, because you've just got no time in the day to complete all that, which is just assumed to be the job by, you know,
Yeah,
by so many, both in and out of the profession. That's just what the job is. That means that if you also happen to be somebody with a family, then you've just got much less time for family, which inevitably creates tensions at home as well. So then when
yeah,
you are at school during the work day, this is the time I'm supposed to be working, but now I'm spending most of my work time thinking about the fight or the tension or whatever at
yeah,
home, because I've, you know, putting pressure on
yeah,
my home life. Then you get back home and you're worried about work, and the, you know, all you're
yeah,
doing is you're always either at work or thinking about work. And when you're thinking about family, it's you know,
yeah.
it's a tension.
And again,
It just
to
creates such a cycle of pressure,
yeah,
right?
and exactly, because it's a cycle. To flip that, when I work with teachers, like they can bring whatever is on their mind at
Right.
the time. So quite often, because I think what I said before, like teachers generally, like you want to do a good job, so you tend to focus on the work stuff. But if, and I have worked with teachers that have said, actually, I'm, you know, this isn't quite right at home at the moment, or I'm stressed about this, or I need to, and like by putting things in place so that home's better, they
Mm-hmm.
then feel calmer and happier, and then
Yeah.
their job becomes easier,
Yeah.
because it's a
Yeah.
cycle. Like it's not
Yeah.
one or the other. And I
Yeah.
think when schools, so individual schools, the government, head teachers, individual teachers, like when they sort of view teacher well-being as the
Yeah.
tea and coffee and biscuits and the
Mm-hmm.
extra
Mm-hmm.
nice stuff and doing yoga every day or whatever that is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that might be part of it for some people, but to
Yeah.
say to have good well-being you have to do yoga, some people are going to go, I don't want to do that,
Yeah.
like that isn't what
Yeah.
it is, you know. So it has to be that cycle. It has to be like,
Yeah.
if you feel good, you will do your job better, and if you do your job better,
Yes.
you'll
Yeah.
feel good
Yeah.
about it, and then you're just going to keep spiraling up
Yeah.
rather than
Exactly
spiraling
right.
down.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there's an irony there as well, because there's a trend now, a very positive trend now, is to recognize uh, the role that the home life plays in our students, right? So the students' learning is heavily impacted by their
Mhm.
home life and their outer school environment. And that's something that was just completely ignored for, you know, for generations and generations. And in relatively recent years, we've started to look at this as a profession, you know, and the research
Mhm.
has started to point that way, and teachers are
Yeah.
encouraged to think about that. So we're now thinking about the students as kind of, you know, more
Yes.
holistically, as
Yeah.
and yet ignoring the fact that the same must be true for the teachers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I think I don't think as well, like this is the case everywhere and in every school. And I think again there will be some kind of spectrum between schools
Sure.
that have
Of
really
course.
got this right, and there will be
Yeah.
schools that are really, you know, really positive places for teachers and students to be. And I think if, but again, like I think you'll find that they come together. I think you'll find that if you have a school where teachers feel happy and confident about going in and doing their job, I think you'll find that the pupils or the students will have a better result.
Yeah.
You know, if you find that you
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
where morale is really low,
Yeah.
like teaching is probably going to be low, because
Yeah.
if staff morale is low, how do you get your kids to be up and
Exactly. I mean, it comes
bubbly
down even to the
learning?
most kind of sort of minuscule element of that. I think is just the topic that you happen to be teaching on a given day. If you're, as a teacher, you know, walking into a classroom to teach a unit or a topic, some material that you're not particularly bothered about, and you're just teaching it because it's on the curriculum and you have to teach it, but you couldn't really care less about it. How we ever expect the students to be enthusiastic about something that the teacher clearly isn't enthusiastic about, that's even on that very minor level.
Yeah.
The students' attitude and the general atmosphere is a direct reflection of how the teacher is approaching things, of course. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, to kind of add to that, again, like there's positive trends, but if anything is taken in the wrong way, it doesn't have the impact. So an example would be, I don't know how familiar you are with the concept of growth mindset,
Yeah.
and you know, it became quite a buzzword.
Yeah.
um, and the danger of the buzzword is that then it just gets sort of like used as a tick box rather than
Yeah.
actually what it is. And really, when I'm coaching, whether or not I use that phrase, growth mindset, it is about changing your mindset to be able
Yeah.
to cope with problems. And like I said, when I was teaching and I felt I didn't have a choice, I realized
Yeah.
I wasn't empowered, and I'm trying to now empower teachers
Yeah.
so they feel
Sure.
they do have a choice to do things, which is
Yeah.
growth mindset. But
Yeah.
but going back to what I was saying, like if you have, I've seen, you know, beautiful growth mindset displays in a
Right.
classroom, and you know, here's all the things that we do and this is what growth mindset is. But if you as the teacher aren't modeling that,
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know how effective a nice colourful display is going to be when
Yeah.
actually you're not modeling it. And so if
Right.
you're saying to children it's okay to make mistakes, but then you make a mistake and your head teacher comes in and tells you
Yeah.
off in front of
Exactly right.
children,
Yeah. Yeah.
for example,
Exactly
like
right. Yeah.
that isn't growth mindset as a school.
Yeah.
So
No.
therefore you can have these beautiful displays, but you're not following it through, which probably goes back to what we said before. Like if you focus on the wrong things, if you focus on all the
Yeah.
Pinterest
Exactly right.
classrooms
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
the stuff behind
Yeah.
it,
Of course.
you're not going to get
Without
the
actually
actual.
implementing it, and yeah, exactly right. It's something that I found very kind of comical, I suppose, about growth mindset as well. You know, anytime something becomes a buzzword like that, it becomes the trending topic. Everybody's talking about it, but very few people have either read the book or you know. And I've not read the whole book, I must admit. Is it Duckworth? I forget which one is which. Was Angela Duckworth's
Carol
growth
Dweck.
mindset? Carol Dweck. Is Duckworth the grit? Is that anyway? They when it became very popular. What I found very comical was that then people talked about it in terms of, well, either you have a growth mindset
Yeah.
and that's a good thing, or you have a fixed mindset and that's a bad thing, which is almost the exact opposite of what the concept is supposed to be, right? It's actually turning it on its head and just taking the existing problem of, well, you've got it or you haven't, and just adding a new paradigm to saying, well, either you've got a growth mindset or you haven't. And so you've got all these kind of as you say, you know, the banners and the posters and the wall displays to talk about how great a growth mindset is, but not just that the teacher isn't displaying it the way you described, but also no work really being done with the students to get them there. Just telling them that you need to have a growth mindset, not how to have a growth mindset, not actually working to develop it. And again, at the teacher level and the student level, we're talking a good game, but nothing is actually being done to achieve it.
That's just the danger with anything, though. If anything is sort of in schools, if anything is sort of put onto you as an initiative, like you have to do this, and it's not fully embraced and fully understood, you can see, and I think you can see this, like I've worked in schools where the values of the school have been absolutely embedded in everything you do, and that you see such a difference from when you go to schools where they have values, these are our school values, and they're written on the wall, and you ask the children and they'll repeat them to you, but they don't really know what they mean, or they're not really showing it, like it's not embedded. So I suppose it's with everything, it's going back to the well-being as well. Like if you kind of make a board in the staff room that says teacher well-being, and it says, you know, do some yoga, have a cup of tea, like talk to people, but you don't have a culture where your staff feel like they can go and ask for help when they have a problem, and asking for help is actually seen as a weakness, or they don't want to ask for help because they're going to be, people assume that they should know, and they don't want to sort of show that they don't know everything. But again, like when you think about it, we're trying to teach students, well, I definitely was, and I think generally teachers will be like, it's okay not to know everything, like that. So then why as teachers do we expect that we should know everything, and we think,
exactly right.
I can't possibly ask for help because someone will judge me. Like I wouldn't want my class to say, well, I didn't ask you for help because I thought you would judge me. I'd be absolutely appalled if they thought
exactly
that.
Right.
So why do we as teachers sort of not afford ourselves the same compassion, really, that you do to students?
I mean, you talk about choice as well a few times, and I like to again work on developing that choice and voice. I put them together. I like to ensure that our students have choice and voice, but again, it's something that we want our students to have, forget perhaps to ensure that our teachers have it. You mentioned the yoga example a couple of times now. I mean, if you're in a school where hey, we're going to put a yoga sessions on every Friday because we asked the teachers what they like, and they said they like yoga, so we're going to put yoga on.
And you
But
can come if you like. You have a
right,
choice if you
but
can
so
come.
often
Don't make it
the teachers aren't
compulsory.
consulted on this, right? It's sort of like,
Yeah.
we're going to do something good for the teachers, and we have decided that thing is yoga. Nobody has been asked about it. No, the teachers haven't been given a voice. There's no choice involved. It's just it's a I don't know, it's a performance, but it's not doing anybody any favors. And then it's exactly like imposing a curriculum on the students and then being told, well, make sure you give your students some voice and some choice. Well, okay, but can I have some? Yeah.
And I use that example. I haven't had that in, like, for me, but I know that's a real example that I've heard.
Yeah, I haven't either, actually, but I've heard it. Yeah, likewise.
That it's like, every Friday at 4:00, you're all expected to come to the hall and do yoga or meditation to relax. And you're thinking, like, that's not relaxing because you're telling me I have to be there at this time or whatever. So it's just the irony. I think that's why that one stands out for me, because it's the irony of, like, the opposite of what the yoga meditation is meant to achieve.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If you say, right, at 4:00 you must be here to do it. And the same with like what you were saying before, like, you must come and have cake because it's good for you. Like, well, actually, what if it's not? Like, what if you're trying to be healthy? Like, it's about choice. Like, if you're trying to be healthy, and being told you have to go and eat cake when actually you wanted to get your work done, like, that might not be good. Or even like things where I've worked with people and they've tried to be helpful, but what they've said to, like, new teachers, like newly qualified teachers and things, they've sort of said things like, right, you must have a day where you go home by 4:00. Because that's good to, and I agree with the principle. Like, I do think
I think all of these are the sentiment.
If you
is
say you
always
have
positive.
to, suddenly it adds another stress, because then these people go, oh, I've been told I have to go home by 4:00.
Spend all day
I can't go home by 4:00
around trying to get finished by 4.
And was it really worth it? Or should they just stay till 4:30 and actually eating some lunch, because they wouldn't
exactly right. Well, they go home at 4:00 and then they're working at home until 9:00 to do all the things that they would have preferred to stay at the school and do, perhaps. Exactly.
It's not one size fits all. So what,
exactly right.
Like, what I'm realizing is, like, I have my experience, but the reason why I coach teachers through their experiences, because with coaching there's no I'm not giving an answer. Like, I'm helping them come to their conclusion. Because if I said, right, what worked for me was I left at this time on this day and I went to the gym on this day and I did this,
so now you need to do the same.
that isn't helpful, is it? Like, it's got to be what works for them. And for some teachers, their answer might be something that I would never have thought of doing, and that it might be that actually it would have been amazing for me and I just hadn't thought of it because I wasn't creative enough. It's like the students, like, if you're just telling them what to do, you're not allowing them to come up with their own creativity, and that you've got to trust that they have all the answers they need. They just might need some help to get to them.
But there's another cycle there. You talked earlier about how everybody has an opinion on teaching because everybody has been in school, which is unlike really any other profession. There's no other profession that everybody has had the patient experience of, and then they become the agent, right? There's nothing else quite like that. When I've brought this up, sometimes people say, well, we've all been to a doctor, we've all been the patient, but we haven't all been a doctor for 8 hours, or a patient in a hospital for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week for 12 years of our life. No one has been in that position for any other profession other than teaching, which on the one hand brings up what you mentioned earlier, the idea of everybody thinking they know about teaching because they've all been students. But also it means that there's something unique about teaching where every teacher comes from that. All of those people, some of those people go on to be teachers. And so then every new teacher is so deeply inculcated in whatever model that they come from. It's very difficult to step outside of it and try to do something different. So everything you're talking about now, the position that the students are put in, it's no surprise that they then go on to perpetuate that when they become teachers later, because it's very difficult to step outside of something that you've just been bathed in for so many years and so many hours, that it just continues and perpetuates. It has to be really kind of analyzed to realize, oh, maybe what I'm doing, even though this is what all of my teachers did and what my entire school experience was, maybe I should think about doing something different. That's not the easiest conclusion to come to.
And I think, like, again, in all professions, but I can only really talk on teaching, but like the phrase amongst teachers of this is the way we've always done it, I think can be really dangerous, because it's the same thing. Like it stops innovation, and it stops creativity. And whenever I sort of went into a new, I think, you know, it flows quite nicely that I was a teacher and now I'm a coach, because the kind of one thread of that is asking lots of questions and and as a teacher, sometimes I wasn't actually encouraged to do that. And it's funny, again, because it's what we'd want our students to do. But I would, you know, sit in meetings and say, why are we doing it like that? Or what, you know, what's the benefit of that? And when the answer is, that's just the way it is, like for me, that's red flags. I'm like,
absolutely.
I think maybe you should be able to explain it better. And I think if someone said to me, well, we do it like this because we've tried out all these other ways, and actually this is the best solution we found for the children, I'm not a troublemaker, you know.
No, I'll give it a go.
I don't mean to be
Yeah.
a troublemaker. Like I just want to know that what I'm doing, like we said before, is about the children and has the impact. So if the answer is, we've tried it, we've done this and this is what we've come to, I go, great, let me go and try it. But if the answer is, well, it's just what we've always done, and so like you say, like then teachers are maybe caught in this cycle, and I definitely was, and I feel like that's why what I'm trying to do now is I'm sort of motivated, if it makes any sense, like of going back to help me a few years ago, like and think, what could I have done
needed?
for myself? And what I needed was just that outlet of knowing that I had a choice, and knowing that I had a place where I could come to a solution for myself. Because actually, when I reflect back, like I was a good teacher, I had the answers, I had the strength and the skills I needed inside of me, but sometimes I didn't see that. Sometimes I thought, I'm not good enough, like this is the way it has to be, like that I have no choice, you know, the things I said before. And I suppose that's just the opposite of empowerment, isn't it? Like that's
I
like,
think so.
Don't have a choice.
I think there's two things there. One thing I want to say about that, the idea of being able to explain why you're doing something you're doing, an inverse of that, again, because I'm in sort of the opposing position where I'm training teachers, I'm working with teachers, you know, to some extent I'm giving them ideas, I'm giving them techniques. One of the things that I always say with the teachers I work with is, you know, look, this is the way I do it, and it's also what I recommend. You know, I do it this way because it works well, so I do recommend it. But if you have something else that you want to do and you can tell me why you'd rather do it another way, then that's fine. You know, if you say, I'd rather do it this way, or I think that way is a better way, then I'm completely open to that. Whether they're teachers that I'm training that they'll then go off and work somewhere else, or they're teachers that are working for me, I want them to do what they think is right because they've thought about it, not because I told them they should do it. And you know, there's an element of me that kind of hopes that they'll agree with me. But if they come to a conclusion where they say, well, look, you know, I'm going to try it this way, even try something I'm not sure it's going to work, but I'll try it and maybe it will work better. Any element of thinking about that and analyzing the reasons why, the motivations for doing things, is what I want to see. And again, I think even as a trainer, there's something a little bit unique about that, because many of the other, whenever I've attended training or whenever I've been in that position as, you know, on the receiving end of that, it doesn't seem very common that teachers are told, you know, first of all, we're doing it this way because, and second of all, if you can think of another way, then try it out. It seems like a lot of teacher training is, this is the correct answer, and everybody, you know, you must all do it this way. This is what the textbook says, so you must do it this way. This is what the trainer said, so we must all do it this way. And so again, teachers are often not cast in the role of being agents, of being in charge of their practice. They are you know, on the one hand, we want our teachers to be creative and passionate, and then on the other hand, we want them to do exactly as they're told. And it just doesn't,
that's the same
fit together.
in the UK. Like that's the same kind of, you know, there is levels of micromanagement that, and I think again, it's all about striking a balance. Like you need accountability. You need to know that teachers, there needs to be some kind of accountability because we're doing an important job. But when accountability sort of slides too far into micromanagement and checking up on you every day in every way, and not allowing you to think for yourself and make mistakes. Because if you're not being encouraged, you know, if you're told you have to do it this way and you try a slightly different way and it fails, and that's a negative, that's like, well, you should have done it my way, you're not giving people a chance to go, well, that didn't work. And failure is a good thing, because failure is how you learn, isn't it? Like, failure is part of learning.
The other thing as well, one of the things that I've tried to labor quite a lot is this, you know, the word accountability. I agree completely that teachers need to be accountable, but teachers need to be accountable for results rather than for their, you know, ability to follow the rules or whatever it is. And if you for the process, exactly, there could be a dozen different processes that lead to good results, and you might try something new out and it doesn't work, but you might try something new and it works better than anything else. And if you're getting the results, that's where the accountability should be. And most teachers don't feel comfortable experimenting, because if it doesn't improve on what's already there, then they're going to get in trouble for it. So either they try something different and it's exactly the same, well, why didn't you do it the way everybody else does it? Or they try something different and it doesn't work, or why did you do that? You shouldn't be you know, experimenting with your students, and so they don't bother. They don't feel like they have the scope or the space to experiment. And these experiments are how we push the profession forward, how we learn to be better teachers. You know, it's necessary, and yet it's also so restricted.
It's lifelong learning, which again is like what I was passionate about teaching my class, my children. I want to teach them to leave school being lifelong learners. Like, what I'm not, you know, and I think again, like, this was sometimes felt like an unpopular opinion, but when I was teaching in primary, like, I was sort of saying, like, I don't really, you know, I want them to leave school, like, being able to read and write and being able to be numerate and to understand things. But actually, more than that, I would prefer that I've taught them how to be resilient. And I've taught them that, like, you try something, and when it doesn't work, you learn from that and you reflect and you move on and you solve problems and you look at things in different ways and you ask for help and you communicate. Because what I would say is, if I've taught them that, it doesn't really matter if they understand long division yet, because they can, then they've got all the skills to, when they need long division, they can learn long division. But if I've taught them how to do long division because they've followed my process and they've just step by step done what I've done and not put any thought into it, they can be great at following that process of long division. But if I've missed all the other stuff, like, which is going to get them further in life? You know,
well, like, I mean, you either decide, you either decide to develop a student who will graduate with the ability to continue learning for the rest of their life, or you teach them everything that you possibly can in a 12-year period, and then they stop learning because they don't know how to learn. So we've got 12 years for them to learn everything they're going to need. We've got to use this 12 years because that's all we've got. After this, there won't be any more learning. Or you can step back from it and say, well, how about we teach them how to learn? And then they've got 60 years after that they can keep learning new things. And it's a complete, you know, reversal of what I think we should want.
Sometimes I don't think many teachers, I'd like to think not many teachers actually have the opposing view to that. I think most teachers would want everything you've said, but I think sometimes the systems that are in place,
they just feel very restricted.
It meant that I felt I was sort of had an unpopular opinion when I'm saying, like, I don't really care that much about spelling tests, because actually, like, I'm getting told, why are your children not making progress in this? And I'm thinking, but, you know, this child now comes in every day smiling and actually wants to be in the classroom.
And asks questions and tells you about the things that they read at home. And
for them, their progress might be that they can now sit in a lesson and engage and not punch the child that sat next to them for no reason, you know, because that is progress. But if I'm not being measured, if my progress as a teacher, like my worth as a teacher, is being measured on, well, why haven't they improved in their spelling test, or why haven't they gone up in their math scores? Well, then you're not going to see progress. But like, if you come and see what we're doing, like, the progress is that child is now sat there smiling. Like, that for me is major progress. And where I felt maybe a bit of disillusion sometimes was when I didn't feel I felt that shouldn't be an unpopular opinion, you know. But when you feel like that's an unpopular opinion in the, whether or not it was, or whether it's what I thought it was, again, a lot of it was in my head, but what I thought I had to be doing, when I feel like I'm having to fight to say, I really want to make this child feel happy to be in school, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to push them on their maths today.
Yeah.
Like, if that feels like an unpopular opinion, you sort of feel like, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I think all of that quite nicely lays out why somebody might leave the teaching profession. So what for you, as you did, what I mean, if there's anything interesting to share with about what happened after you left, what you did afterwards, but then ultimately you've come back. So you left. What happened next?
Yeah. Well, so when I left, I had no plan. So I think other teachers will resonate with this, because when I left, what was interesting was no teacher friend of mine, no colleague or teacher friend sort of questioned my decision. I said,
Okay.
I've resigned, and they went, great. Like, good for you. Like, that's really, no one sort of went,
all right for some.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think probably other people probably saw in me that I wasn't myself. Like, I didn't really see it. I think when a change happens slowly, you maybe don't see how much it's affected you, but I feel so much more myself now. Like, I feel like, even like the way I'm talking to you now, and I just feel like I'm kind of energized by what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think I felt like that a few years ago. So I think probably my friends had seen it, chipping away at me, and so when I said I was leaving, they thought that's a good thing.
It's about
But
time.
the reason the reason why I left was because I felt like I needed to get off the treadmill for a bit. Like, you're constantly moving, and you don't feel like you can pause because you'll miss something, and then the children will suffer. That's what I was telling myself. Like, and so I just felt like I couldn't come up with a plan of something else I wanted to do while I was still teaching. So I just thought, I have to leave, and I will give myself the headspace to do that. And actually, what was interesting was I made the decision to leave in I'm going to say sound mind. I don't know if that's like the technical term, but I made the decision to leave, and I resigned, and I just knew, like, there's something else for me in this life, because I just thought, I can't do this until I retire. I can't be doing this when I'm 70. I can't keep working at this pace. I can't keep working feeling like this. Like, I have to go. And that was basically what it boiled down to, is that I can't do another 40 years of this. Like, the thought, I just couldn't do it. So I made the decision to leave, but then it was like, I suppose, like, my body probably caught up with my brain, and then I just sort of burnt out, even though I'd already made the decision to leave. I think then I thought, right, I've decided to leave, so I've just got to really do like my last term and be really good. And I think my body just went, no.
Yeah, we're done now. Yeah.
I actually just burnt out at the end, which is really what I'm passionate about, making sure other teachers don't do. Because when I'll go back on the story. So I left. So I needed some time out, and I just needed to, like, not be a teacher for a bit. That was really my plan. So I didn't. And when I say I didn't have a plan, what I did have was, I knew I had enough savings to just take a break for a bit. So that was sort of the plan, was like, I don't need to have a plan, if you see what I mean. So I suppose I had a bit of a plan in that sense. Took some time out, kind of tried some different things. Like, I volunteered in different things, but just like different things. Like, I volunteered at my local library, and I volunteered, and I led walks around, like, my local countryside, and I volunteered, and I worked in a charity shop, and I just met different people and did different things. And I got a part-time job in a cafe, and I just did, like, really nice different things that I just kind of started to get me back. Because what we touched on before is, like, if you're constantly teaching all the time and you don't do anything else, like, you lose a bit of your identity. And I just kind of had to do some other stuff. And then I came round to learning about coaching, and I knew a bit about coaching through teaching, because I'd been had a bit of training on it, and I mentored like new teachers and student teachers, but I really tried to use a coaching approach with them, where I wasn't telling them the answers, as we've just kind of alluded to. Like, you'll get helping them to get to their own conclusion, and maybe this is how I might, in my mentoring, I might be like, this is how I might do it, but just like you said, why don't you try something else and we can compare, or whatever. It wasn't like my way or the highway kind of thing. So I was always quite keen on coaching. And then I went on a course about changing career, and the person running it was a coach.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my God, this is like a job. Like, you're doing
I can do
like,
this. Yeah.
and one of the questions, what was really funny, was on the day there was a question about whose job are you, you know, secretly a bit jealous of?
Yours.
And I was like, your job? Like, I think it's your job.
Yeah,
And she was
right.
I said, I think I didn't know this was a job, like, because
Yeah.
she was doing all the bits of teaching that I love. She was facilitating,
Right.
she was getting people to come up with their own answers. She had a room of people, and we were all like, with my teacher hat, I was like, this is amazing, because we were working with one person, standing up, moving somewhere else, doing all this. And I thought, oh my God, like, this is like all the bits of teaching that I love, and it's called a coach, but I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So it kind of really set me on that. So then I trained as a coach. I mean, you know, it's a long process. It's taken like a year or so. And so I kind of started that last summer, and trained as a coach. And again, didn't know quite what I was going to do with it. I just knew that I loved it, because it's the helping someone get to their own answers.
Yeah.
And then I kind of started missing education, but not necessarily missing the classroom, but there was something about it. I'm just really drawn to it. Like, hopefully, like, we've had this chat today, like, I'm really passionate about everything we've talked about. Like, you know, you can see that, hopefully. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
to leave this and not be able to have these kind of discussions, I was like, I don't think I can leave it. So I thought, how can I help? And so I was thinking about, like I touched on before, like, thinking about my timeline. And I think if I tried to help me right at the end, I don't know if that would have been, that's where I started. I thought I could help me when I wanted to leave and I was stuck and I didn't know what to do. But I think I was sort of too far gone in a way.
Just help you find the door.
Yeah, and I thought, I don't actually really want to be seen as someone that helps teachers leave, like, because then I'm going against everything I stand for in education.
Yeah, sounds like palliative care.
Yeah, like, how I don't want to do that. So like, how can I help? So I was like, maybe what I can do is I can go back along my timeline to the point probably before I actually realized I needed help.
Yeah.
But actually just giving me that support and that outlet of, like, reminding me I had a choice. Because as I said to you, I think the key thing was I forgot I had a choice, or I didn't feel I had a choice. And a lot of the things I told myself, I didn't realize at the time I told myself, like, for me, they were true. So when I said things to myself, like, you're stuck, like, you can't do anything else, you're a good teacher, well, sometimes I didn't even say that, but like, you're a good teacher, like, you can't do anything else, like, you are a teacher, that's all you can do. Sometimes I'd even tell myself I wasn't a good teacher, but I genuinely thought, for me, they weren't thoughts, they were my reality. And now I've stepped away from it, I've realized they were my thoughts, but I didn't know that they were my thoughts. Does that make any sense?
No, yeah,
like,
I'm with you. And also, I think there's a perspective on that, right? I mean, when you're in that, maybe it might be a bit strong to call it a rut, but when you're kind of stuck in that mindset, just a switch of perspective on exactly the same thoughts, rather than, you know, I'm stuck in this and there's nothing else I can do, rather than, you know, this is what I should be doing, I'm good at this and this is where I belong, is the same idea but from a completely different angle, and it's just a very different feeling, right?
Yeah, and so I think through coaching I learned so much about myself through kind of the journey I went through, from real kind of low, like in that rut, to actually kind of, I think rebuilding myself is probably too strong, but kind of really having to change the way that I thought and approach things.
Sure.
And I just kind of thought I'd probably be a better teacher now. Like, I do think now
sure.
better, because I can manage my own mind better. Like, I can manage, you know, like we talked about all the comparisons and the kind of knowing what feels unmanageable, what actually is unmanageable, like knowing where I should, like, instead of focusing on the one child that didn't learn, the 29 that did, you know, all that, it's just flipping it, isn't it?
Yeah,
so like
absolutely.
learning all those things, I'm like, if I had all this, like if I'd had all this a few years ago, maybe I'd still be doing it, like maybe I'd still be teaching, like I just think I'd be better at it because I had the me bit sorted. And so I thought it's a shame not to share that somehow. So what I kind of do is gone back on my timeline to the point where teachers are starting to just feel a bit overwhelmed, or even before they even get to there, just like they've got a lot on, as most teachers do. And just help them to manage.
It just feels like the what's the word I want to use here, but it just feels like that's the kind of the state of affairs, right? Oh, this is just the way it is, you can't imagine it being any other way, right?
Well, that's why I didn't do it. That's why I probably didn't do anything to change, because I didn't know that I could. Like, I didn't feel I had that choice. Like you
Mm-hmm.
say, like, this was my reality, not my thoughts. Like, I thought this is the way things need to be. So I didn't know that I could change it, you know. So now I know that actually you can change it, and you can change it relatively easily
Mm-hmm.
by just sort of working out where to focus your energy. Like, and you can't change, you need the cultures to change as well. Like, you can't, like we've touched on, like, if you can't make a decision on your own if your school and your organization doesn't sort of support
it,
that. But what I'm finding is schools, I think, are generally, lots of schools have realized the importance of, if you have well teachers, you're going to have teachers that teach well, you know?
I
like,
do think that trend is happening.
So I just think now it's really nice for me to come back to education after a little break, and I've realized I'm still really passionate about it. And I think I just felt when I left, I thought, I don't want anything to do with it. If I'm honest, I just thought, I just don't want to touch it for a while. And then I kind of thought, well, actually, I do really love all the reasons why I went into it, but I think I needed the break. And I think, had I tried to, some teachers do it, some teachers transition from teaching to something else, and they manage to train, you know, in the evenings of their teaching job, and do this and leave on Friday, start a new job on Monday. Like, how they do that, I have no idea, because I didn't have time to do anything else. But that was the point. Like, I didn't feel I had time to do anything other than teach. So therefore I didn't have the headspace to do it. So I sort of needed to have the break to build the headspace. But what I'm aware of is that actually that's not that sustainable for many teachers.
Exactly right.
And also, it's not really what I want. I don't really want teachers to get to the point that I did, where they thought, this is my only choice is to stay and feel, you know, pretty miserable, or leave with no plan. Like, I don't really want other teachers to get to that point. Before they get to there, like, if I can help them feel more confident and empowered and able to have some choice and make some decisions about how they spend their time and energy, like, I just hope they won't get to the point I went to, because it did get quite bleak at some point.
And as I can imagine, as you've already, you know, as we've already explained earlier on, or assessed earlier on, it's not good for the teachers. It's also not good for the students. You know, it's creating an environment that nobody is benefiting from.
Well, and actually, wider than that, no one benefits, because I don't think my family and friends would probably get a very good side of me. You know, well, I know they won't, because if all I'm doing outside is moaning and feeling stressed, and actually I can't come and see you at the weekend because I've got this to do.
Exactly.
And when I do,
your relationships
my
are suffering.
mind's somewhere else. So other people, my friends, my family, like, my health, you know, if you don't feel like you have time to do anything to look after yourself, like, then your health suffers. Like, and if you really want to go down that line, like, well, actually then we're becoming, like, that's a burden on the NHS. Now I know that they're
and also but I mean, that's true.
To go to the doctor and say,
and also a burden on the loved ones, the friends and family, who not only are they not seeing the best side of you in the way that you've just described, but also they start to worry about you, and they start to question why you're putting so much time and effort into it. And then, because the teacher is so kind of inculcated in the culture, their answer is, well, because this is what I have to do. And so you end up now defending, you now kind of representing that position to the people who are worried about you, and you're telling them, no, I have to do this, and you're just building on top of.
And that's what's so sad. Like, I remember saying things like, this is just the way it is. Like, this is what I have to do. Like, I have to
don't understand.
work.
I'm a teacher. Yeah,
exactly. And so, because, as we've already talked about, like, it's very hard to question that. Like, you don't want to be the only teacher that says, I'm going away for the weekend and I'm not doing any work. If everyone else goes, what? How are you doing that? Like, we've all to work to, and you feel like, oh God, maybe I'm the you know, I'm the odd one out here, that I've actually thought it's okay to have a life, and maybe I was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Exactly.
And so, because I would do things like, I would go, like, I was being big into travel and things, and so I would go and travel in my holidays and things. But even then, you sometimes get teachers that would go, well, how are you doing that? Because I'd be like, okay guys, I have to go today because I'm going to the airport, I'm going away. And they're like, but and I'm like, well, for me this is important, but actually
Yeah.
sometimes it was important, but sometimes, you know, you sort of burn out. I went away once for a half term, for the whole half term, and I just got ill at the end of it. Like I was away and I was just like in bed with flu on this yoga retreat because I think I just stopped, you know, and
Yeah.
actually relaxed.
Yeah.
And then I
Everything
got
catches up.
ill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can. Yeah. That's a very strong reality for a lot of people. I think once you kind of accept a situation, suddenly it comes crashing down. I think it's quite common.
Yeah.
So
So I think
you
it's hard to stop in that sense.
yeah. So you think about that and how you could have kind of given yourself some advice or some guidance back then, and what are some of the things, if you could give yourself a short list, what would you have said to yourself, or what do you now like look back at that and say, what are the main things that you would tell yourself back then to change or to do differently?
Yeah. So I think a really key thing is I would have told myself, like, I do have a choice. And
Mm.
it's something I really strongly believe in now. Like, everyone has a choice to some degree. Like, it,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know, it might not be huge, but there is always another option. So this is what I
Yeah.
encourage people to do when I'm coaching them. Like, what could you do
Sure.
to get
Okay.
out of the situation, or what could you do to manage this? Okay, what else could you do? And let's come up with like 20
So
things you could do. There's always something else you
right.
could do, even when you think this is the way it has to
Right.
be.
And so just so either clarify or elaborate and make sure I'm getting this right. So that's not now just the big question of choice to be a teacher or not be a teacher. Those
No,
big questions. But that you by that I assume you mean that anytime you face what feels like a brick wall,
yes,
remodel that as a choice. So
yes.
okay, you're in
So
this situation, whatever it is.
even the way you feel like, well, I have to do my planning
Yeah.
now
Right. Okay. Yeah.
at this time, you know, that's one thing I could do, rather than
Yeah.
like I have to do that. I could do that, or I could do
Yeah.
this. Because one choice is I don't do it. Like, that is a
Yeah. Right.
choice.
Right.
You
So
think
just
I
see
have to
everything as
do.
a choice. Yeah. Okay.
One choice is I could do my plan now. One choice is I don't do my plan now. One choice
Yeah.
is like I ask someone else to help me. Another choice
Yeah.
is I do half of it now
Get a
and half
cup
of
of
it later.
tea first, and
Even
I
if
yeah.
they're
Right.
small things, like, you always have a
Yeah.
choice. But
Yeah.
I didn't
Good.
feel
Yeah.
I had a choice. So that would be a real key thing. And yeah, it comes down to
Hmm.
the bigger thing as well, like if you stay or
Sure.
if you go. But really on the small level. And I think if you have all those choices, you probably won't get to the bigger things, like should I stay or
Yeah.
should I go if I feel
Yeah.
happier. So that's a big one for me. The other thing is, like, I would say to myself, like, take some time. Like,
Hmm.
I suppose it comes down to choice again. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, I thought it had to be that way. I thought I had to work these
Yeah.
hours and these weekends and whatever, but like, maybe I didn't. You know,
Yeah.
like, maybe I could have said, if I'd known I had a choice, gone, actually, I'm going to spend my weekends doing something that will make me feel more
Yeah.
alive and
Yeah.
more motivated and calmer and happier,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do better as a result. But I kept going on this treadmill and kept
Yeah.
working harder and harder, and that doesn't make you work better.
No, it does seem like the focus there, perhaps the priority there is, or the reminder there is to think about the importance of your own self-care, right?
Yeah,
And maybe a reminder that thinking about yourself and caring for yourself is not to talk about choice. Actually, you don't have to make a choice between caring for yourself or caring for your students. You're
yeah.
not on a
Could be the same
dichotomy
thing.
where it's one or the other,
Yes.
but they can be the same thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing I'd say to myself, again, on that sort of finding the balance, is, you know, how can you have the impact that you want to have, but in a way that works for you, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
you're still being authentic and true to yourself, but you're still having an impact, but you're also finding joy in it. Like, it's not about, I either do the best for the children or I enjoy my job. Like,
Yeah.
there's a
Right.
place where, like, the impact on the children and the
Yeah.
joy of your job meet. If you put in a Venn
Yeah.
diagram, you know,
Yeah.
you want the bit where you're being most impactful, but you're also getting the most joy from it, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
more joy you get, the more impact you're going to have, and vice
Sure.
versa. So you want
Yeah.
that impact, but you also want the impact between the most impact and you feeling calm. Because if you feel calm, and I think, again, when I look back, I lost my calm for a bit. Like, and
Right.
everyone, generally, it was a word that people used to describe me as a teacher,
Right.
was I was calm in the
Okay.
classroom and stuff, but
And
in
you
my
think that
mind,
faded?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think when I'm calm, now I've really, like, reflected and thought on it, like, when I'm calm, that's where all calm for me isn't just relaxed. Like, calm is like this place where that's where I can be most creative. Like that's where my ideas
Sure.
come from, because I've like calmed my mind enough to
Yeah.
let ideas come in and
Yeah.
you know, and not just feel like that tense and that I have to be constantly doing something. So
Yeah.
I think, again, like on the Venn diagram, like you want to have an impact but you want to feel calm, and they're not opposite. Right. At some points I thought, well, I must be doing everything I can for the children, so therefore I can't feel calm. Find the balance between them. And again, you know, so about you being authentic, you finding joy in your job, you having an impact and you feeling calm, and like maybe if you put all four of those together and you find the bit in the middle, like that is like the sweet spot probably of teaching, where you're going to be able to do it for the next 30 years like I couldn't, because you can find a place.
And you can imagine that finding that point in the middle, if you I think when you find that point, it doesn't necessarily mean, okay, well, I'll do less of one, less of one, less of one, less, so that I can find it. But actually, I mean, just thinking about that idea of the impact you want to have at tension with calm, right? And so you say, well, let's find a kind of a point in the middle. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you kind of are doing less of each. But actually, like we mentioned earlier, you know, if you are having a high impact on your students, if you're delivering a lot to your students, but you're doing that in a way that you can't represent yourself as calm and collected, and having a positive attitude, then that becomes a part of the impact, right? The impact that you're having on them is you are training them, teaching them to be that way, you're modeling that for them. And so actually, if you can maintain your calm, if you can find a place to be where you're more collected and you're more comfortable and calm, then that becomes the impact you're having on your students. You're teaching this, you're delivering this, and you're modeling that all of that is possible in a healthy way.
I actually don't think you have to lose out on anything. Like you say, it's not have less impact so you can enjoy your job more. It's finding the place where you have the most impact but where you also get the most enjoyment, but you can find that balance. It's not one or the other. And I think as we started saying, like if you think, well, it's either I look after the children or I look after me, like that, you know, you're seeing it as a binary choice. And it's not a binary option. It is like, how can I do the best job for my students and the best job for me, and everybody wins. Because I think everybody wins if you can have teachers that want to be there, that are modeling, you know, a calm presence to their classes, and that are enjoying their job and genuinely joyful and smiling, and that rubs off on their students. Like they're going to have a greater impact. And so it's finding the balance. And when I talk about balance, what I don't like is the idea of like work-life balance, because to me that sort of implies that like you do a bit of work and then you do some life.
Exactly.
It has to be like, again, it's not work life, it's balance, and it's balancing everything that's important to you, and I think in a way that works for everyone.
If you ever find yourself in a spot where that's not the case, where you can't find the way, you know, you say, how can I do both of these in a way that you know is going to maximize both of these? If you ever find yourself in a position, because there will be times where maybe that's not possible, it is a case of one or the other. At that point, then I think ultimately you have to, like you've said a few times, you have to just question the sustainability of that. So, well, okay, maybe we just need to scrap that particular paradigm, because either we do this or we do that. In any case, we're only doing 50% of what we should be doing. We're maximizing one thing or the other, but we're losing something. And so that's just not a sustainable model that we should be trying to perpetuate anyway. Maybe we need to scrap that and build something new.
What I would say there is, it's hard without knowing the example, but if you do have, we could do X or we could do Y, like I would challenge and say, what else could you do? Because
exactly right.
Like another option could be something completely else.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
And so that's what I mean when I say there is always a choice. Like if you feel like you don't have a choice, really challenge yourself to think, what else could I do? And even if it's what's the opposite of that, you know, sometimes that's the way to do it. Like say, well, I could do this. Well, what would the stark opposite be? And then come up with something else. And even if you're not going to do that, like what's the bits in between? And what would someone else do? And what would, you know, my head teacher tell me to do? Or what would my students say? Like what would other people do? Because there is always a choice.
That's I think a very valuable way of looking at it. I like to talk a lot about focusing on absence rather than looking at what's there and what's bad and what's broken and how we can fix or improve something. it's often hard to see what's not there because it doesn't leave a mark, right? You're not aware of something that's not there, but sometimes it's the thing that's absent that you need to say, oh, that's not there, and we need to build it. We need to create this thing that we don't have, and we should have it, rather than focusing on the problem and how we can maybe tweak it and, you know, kind of work around it. Sometimes there's just something missing that needs to be built from the ground up.
And that's another thing I always sort of do when I work with teachers, and I think this is advice I'd give to myself a few years ago, is don't focus on the problem. So what I do is quite often, like, teachers will come to a session and say, like, you know, I'm worried about this or whatever, and kind of my first question in that is, okay, tell me what you would like to be true. So they say, like, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Okay, how would you like to feel? Like, tell me about the positives, and like take me into the future where you've got to a point, and I always say, like, don't worry about when you get there or how you've got there, but at some point
imagine it's there.
You've got there and everything is as you want it to be, and describe that. So if you then think about how you're moving around school and how you're teaching your lessons with this like calmness that you really, the ideal that you want, you know, thinking about how you would enjoy your job if everything was as you wanted it to be, what that would look like, what it would feel like, and all of that. And then, you know, like, imagine that's where you're getting to. So at any point you can kind of think about how do you
get there?
If that's 10 out of 10 confidence, you know, when you're in a situation of, oh God, what am I going to do, like, what would 10 out of 10 confident Emma do? Like, she probably do this. So then that's another option. Like, you might not think it's an option at the moment because it doesn't feel natural at the moment, but it is an option. Like, you could do that. Like, you probably won't, like, because it might be something that you think, well, that might get me fired if I do that. Or that might, but it's still an option. And the point is, like, if you can unlock some of these, I suppose it's the creativity again. If you can unlock this list of options of things that you could do, even if you immediately cross them off because you think, no, like, that one's going to get me in trouble, that one's not going to go down well, but you've unlocked this sort of creativity that allows you to think about things in a different way, and you're I don't know enough about the science of it, but you're kind of like unlocking another part of your brain, I think, to think about things in a different
way. It's certainly just highlighting possibilities, right? I mean, this is another thing as well. Even taking that outside of the kind of introspective context that we're talking about now, and, you know, choices for the individual. I often wish there were more of a space. Just feels like the natural in school, but it's not. I wish there were more of a space for that type of thinking in the collective environment, in the group environment with teachers, just kind of suggesting anything that comes to mind. You know, okay, what could we do? Here are some outlandish ideas that maybe we won't do, you know, maybe that's too far, but let's put it on the board, and we might find something, you know, a midpoint between here and there, or we might find something that might make somebody else think. But often in the group environment, in the collaborative environment, everybody's a bit timid because they don't want to be the one that says the outlandish thing, or they don't want to be the one that's kind of you know, that's says something that's later deemed impossible or stupid, so they just keep it quiet.
You have to have a culture where that's okay. And I think like when I'm coaching teachers one-on-one, like, I've created the environment is, these are just possibilities. They're things you could do. Like, I'm not going to make you do anything. I'm not going to tell you can burn the piece of paper after you write it down if you want. It doesn't matter. Like, what could you do if anything was possible? You know, if budget wasn't a barrier, if you had all the time that you needed, if you felt this 10 out of 10 confidence, if you were able to, you know, get anyone on side that you wanted to, like, and there's no like fear of, if I say this, someone's going to make me do it. Because I think when you come back to the staff meeting kind of thing, like, if you haven't got that culture, I don't know if you've ever had this, but I've definitely sometimes thought, why did I suggest that? Because I would say something and they go, great,
you can do that.
I shouldn't have said it. But if you feel like it's not an open environment where you can say something and either be laughed or judged or made to do it, you know, you actually just want to get the idea out, evaluate it, talk about some others, like, get that creative thinking, and then find the one that gets the best balance between everything you're trying to achieve. But it comes down to the culture. So you need to kind of build that culture. And again, what I find with teachers is quite often they are talking about things that affect them, but by them making changes, actually it affects their teams. Because I work with a lot of like school leaders, so that they have got teams and they've got, you know, people they manage and people they lead and work with. And so if they can change the way they, you know, run their meetings, for example.
Yeah.
Again, it's what works for them, but also works for someone else. So it's not like, I'll do less of this and more of that and someone loses. It's how, so a prime example would be like, I've had this discussion a few times with teachers about like being more assertive, and they feel like, well, I can't be more assertive because people will think I'm rude, or people, and actually when we flipped it, if you can be more assertive, what you actually are doing is you're creating some boundaries for your team that they'll respect you for, because you're actually just saying, this is the time that you can come and talk to me, this is when things get done, this is how we do it. Like, it's not being rude, it's actually helping them, because they know what they're going to get.
Framework, right? Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
If you view being assertive as that's a thing that I need to do to protect myself, and everyone else will like, whatever the opposite of benefit is, it would be detrimental to everyone else, then that's not the way to think of it. It's like, well, if I can be a bit more assertive, but then actually they'll learn to solve problems for themselves a bit more, because
exactly. And also as you said earlier towards the start, the idea that, for example, when you talked about having an unpopular opinion and kind of querying whether actually it was an unpopular opinion or not, it's highly likely that you're in a room of 20 or 30 teachers who all kind of feel the same way, but nobody feels comfortable saying it. And if you are the first person to start being assertive, you might just open up that possibility for a lot of other people. And suddenly you've got a lot of other people who are being much more proactive, and kind of collaborating in a much more conducive way, because you were the one who took the first step. It could kind of open the floodgates.
If you can have an impact, you can start to do things that are going to positively impact other people. It will start to ripple out, and then like I said before, like, everybody benefits, because that teacher feels empowered and more confident and calmer, but then their team are going to feel calmer as a result. I'm pretty sure, like, if you're led by someone that's quite frantic and stressed, like, you come out of meetings feeling that yourself, like, the energy rubs off, doesn't it?
Exactly.
If you're led by someone that's very calm and purposeful, and they're really focusing on the impact we're going to have and how we're going to do it, like, you come out of meetings feeling empowered yourself. So then they're empowered, so like, they're going to have that impact then on their teams and their students. Everyone benefits. And
also, this is one of the things that I try to do when I work with school leaders as well, is the more empowered your teachers are, the more proactive the teachers are as a leader, whether as a principal or whatever term we apply. You end up with a team that then kind of, to some extent can run itself, and the micromanagement becomes less necessary. And you then have the time to kind of focus on the things that you need to be focusing on, rather than trying to do the job of 20 teachers for them, because you don't think they can do it themselves. So this is one of the things that I try and work on, is the faculty as a whole, how and how can the leader create a culture amongst that faculty that is conducive for every member of the faculty, and for the leader, and for the students. And it's definitely the word we've used a few times now, culture. It's definitely a culture. It's about establishing a culture that's conducive for the whole faculty. It does, I think, sometimes take that outsider, as a coach, as a trainer, as an outsider coming into an institution, to just break a cycle that the institution has fallen into, and they know no other way, and they're stuck on that cycle. And as an outsider, I find that I often am in a position to come in and you talk about choice. You can maybe see the choice because you're seeing from the outside, where they're just completely blind to it because they just see the track. Right?
Like I said to you, I didn't feel like I had that at some points when I was teaching. Like, and that's what I mean. If I tried to help me, if there was like the future me coming in to help me, at some points I think it would have just been hard work. Like, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as future me. I would have been like pulling teeth, because I'd be going, no, this is how life has to be. Like, I'm just stuck. I needed to get to me that bit earlier, where I was going, actually, I believe you. Like, I believe I can make a change, and I believe I am able to do this, and I believe like that I have got the power to do something about it. But if I'd come in too late when I was burning out, I would have.
You're already on the down.
Neither of us would have enjoyed the experience. Past me and future me, we would have been saying, I would have been going, come on, there is something else you can do. And I'd be, no, I can't. This is just my life now. This is what I have to do. So I needed to get to me before that. Which is like what you're saying, like when you go into other places, you can just really, like, you're just holding up a mirror. Like you're helping other people reflect. And again, like one of my teachers I worked with the other day said something like, they said it, and they meant it as a compliment. I just thought it was a funny thing. They said, it's like I'm having a conversation with myself, because you repeat everything I say in a way that it makes more sense to me, but you do use the words that I used, but by hearing you say them. And when you said it, like on its own, it sounds like, well, what am I doing then? Like, why am I here? If it's I'm having a conversation with myself. But I took it as a compliment, because it is, I really use the words that, you know, people tell me, because it's not about me, my ideas, and it's not just me parroting it back to them, but just by kind of holding that mirror up and reflecting back what they've said. When someone else says it, you think, oh, do I really believe that? Like, is that really true? And it's easier to question.
By a similar token, I find one of the, again, early on I thought, oh, does that mean I'm not doing much? Does it mean I'm not, am I not providing much? Because I find now one of the most kind of satisfying responses I get when I've done some development with a teacher is that they'll say, oh, it seems so obvious now. And I used to think, oh, maybe I'm just saying obvious things. Maybe I'm just saying something that's too obvious. But I realize it's just these things that is just outside the realization. It's just beyond their vision of what they could be doing or how they could be doing something. And when they pick up on something, go, oh, that's, now I see it. It seems so obvious. You realize that you've really just kind of tuned into exactly where they were and exactly what they needed.
And I think that's, you know, again, what I would tell myself, if your question was, what would I go back and say? Like, you know, you can do it. Like, you can make a change. Like, things don't have to be the same. Like, it is there. You do have all the answers. You have all the skills and all the strengths you need. You just might need a bit of help to get to them. And you're right. Like, I take it as a massive compliment when people say to me, like, oh, well, I knew all that. I had all the answers myself.
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
Right. But like, I'm aware that, like, for someone that doesn't really understand the process, they might think, well, what are they paying you to do? Like, what are you, what are you doing? But that is it. Because what I don't want is, I don't want to build a dependency. Like, what I'm not is, I'm not going in and telling people how they should do their jobs, because then they're going to keep going, well, what should I do now? Like,
you end up back in that position where, exactly what we said about school. I mean, if you build a school the wrong way, then what you do is you spend 12 years teaching everything, and then when they graduate, the teacher's no longer there, so they have no way of learning.
What do I do?
Right? And as a trainer, and exactly the way you just said, you know, as a trainer and as a coach, what I want to do is I want to help my teachers get into a position where, when they've left me, they know how to overcome a problem. Not how to do what I've told them, but how to use their skills to overcome a new problem.
That is exactly it. And that is, for me, like, the parallel I mentioned before, like questioning going all the way through my teaching and my coaching, but that is the parallel. Like, what I'm trying to do with coaching is, I'm working with teachers, and with teaching I was working with pupils, but it's the same principle. It's like, remember what I said about, I can teach them long division, or I can teach them how to solve a problem and how to be resilient and how to learn, like which one's going to get you further in the long run. So if I keep telling teachers, why don't you do this and why don't you do that, and let me tell you what to do next, then what happens when the next problem comes up? They've got to come back to me. Now, as like a business model, you can say, well, I want to keep them coming back to me because I can keep charging, but that's not, I'm not in this. If I wanted to make
a phrase that I use for that, which I use with my teachers as well in the training, is I have to say, the goal really is to teach yourself out of a job. And unfortunately, there'll always be a new batch of students, but you want the new batch of students. You don't want the old students to keep coming back, because I think it means you haven't done your job. So you want to be teaching your students to the point that they don't need you anymore, and then you've done your job. You just hope there's a new student coming along next cycle.
And I think same thing with coaches. Like, if I'm sure coaches all work in different areas, but if coaches are saying, like, well, I don't want my clients to leave me, like, I think, well, what are you doing then? Like, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is teach people, not people teach, I don't know,
self-sufficiency, isn't it?
I want them to be able to just find that they had that power inside themselves to solve the problems for themselves. So if I'm then saying, well, I do want them to come back, and like I say, if I wanted to make millions, I think there'd be an easier way than trying to stay go into
Yeah, of
education in the
course.
first place,
Absolutely.
and then decide I've left it and I've decided to come back.
Come back. Yeah.
There must be a like that
No,
isn't money that's making me do that. So
no.
okay, it is my business, and at some point I do need to live and eat and do all the other stuff I need money for.
Yeah.
But for me, success is when someone goes, great, like I feel like I can do this now and I can do it without you.
Yeah.
And I can go, great, like go and do your thing, because
Yeah.
that is what I needed. And I just think if I can help more teachers feel that way, like less teachers will burn out, which is what we started with. Like that's what
Exactly
we're trying to do. I'm trying to just help teachers feel empowered in a place where they can do their job well, but they can also enjoy their job and enjoy their life.
Yeah.
And
Exactly
it's not one or the other. It's that balance.
And so how do you find those teachers, those clients, or how do they find you? Is this something, do you do it in your local area? Do you do it online? How can people find you?
Well, I mainly do it online. So I live in the UK, I live near Bristol.
Okay.
And when we're allowed out and about, it might be nice to visit some schools and you know, and I can do things slightly differently if I am in schools. But actually a lot of what I do is online, and I coach like this, and actually that makes it really accessible for teachers. You don't need to pay for me to get there, you don't need to find a room for me to be in your school, you don't need to fit me in around all your classes. Like, you know, it actually, and in a way, probably with lockdown, everyone now knows what Zoom is, and people didn't know
that's
that
right.
a year ago. So actually that's a good thing. Like that's probably made it more accessible. So so most of the work I do is online.
Okay.
With teachers in this country, I think we've been talking today and we've found so many parallels, so maybe there's no reason why it has to be.
I think there's often more likenesses than we might realize when you look around different countries.
That's really interesting for me to like reflect on today, because I think, you know, at first you think, well, I can help these amount of schools in my local area, and then maybe I can work with some other schools outside, but actually like teaching, and we're all facing the same trouble. So it's online most of the time. So and then I either work with individual teachers, or what's great is if I can work with a school. So you know, working with, like this time I've been working with a school and working with different members of the leadership team across the school, because you can actually see then they're all talking about different things, and it's, you know, it's confidential what they bring me, but I can hear them saying, well, I'm starting to see this, and they're starting to see this, and you know that it's creating those ripple effects, and it's having more of an impact for the culture of the school, like we talked about, than just one teacher on their own. So it can either be for an individual teacher or for the school. But I just, if I can help any teacher, then I'm happy. So if it is one and we're going against the school, like that's fine, I can still help that one teacher. But it's really nice.
I think possibly gone the other way. So I started doing or trying to do, so I started training for kind of group training, and then I started working with schools at the school level for the whole faculty. And just recently I've started kind of opening up and reaching out to individual teachers. So I've just now started working with individuals, and it's a very different process, but it's it's very enjoyable. And it does mean, as you say, you know, it does mean the scope for working internationally then, or working on a larger you know, geographical scope at least, is now much bigger. So do you have a website that people can come and find you on? Is there a way that people can get in touch with you if they're interested?
I do. So my website is Emma Cann Coaching. So Cann is CANN. Emma Cann Coaching, or I'm on LinkedIn as Emma Cann, or I'm on Twitter as Emma Cann Coach, or I'm on Facebook as Emma Cann Coaching. Like one of those variations of my name and coach or coaching, you're going to find me.
Fantastic name for the position you're in.
I know, I've been told that.
Emma can, and so can you, I think.
I know.
Yeah,
I've had that. And someone actually said that to me the other day. They really picked up. They're like, "It's such a great name."
Yeah.
I was like, "It's just my name." Like,
yeah.
But I suppose there is maybe a bit of like nominative determinism. I was like, what if I thought about this? Like, what if my name had been Emma Cann?
Emma Can't. Where would you be now?
Exactly.
Where would you be?
Would it have been different? Like, would there be nominative determinism? But maybe I need to remember that, because at times, like I said, I didn't think I could. Like when I was teaching, I did think I can't, and maybe I needed to remember that I can.
That's it. You were born with Emma. You were born with it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure, Emma. Thanks very much.
It's been lovely to chat.
And yep, as I say, I'll put links and things underneath the video. So your website, and if there's anything else you want to share with me, or anything else that, you know, anywhere people can find you or anything people should be looking at, I'll put that in the video. So if you're watching this now, take a look underneath. And is there anything else, Emma, before we finish off?
No, I don't think so. Just
No?
thank you so much, because it's
Brilliant.
been
Yeah,
lovely
thank you.
to chat, and I hope anyone that listens enjoys it as much as I have, because it's been really great to chat and kind of find all these similarities as well between what we found in different ways of teaching, different, you know, children and adults and different continents and all our experiences. But it's been great to find all those similarities and find all those links that we found today.
Great. Thanks very much, Emma. I'll speak to you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye bye.